Welcome to the Real Though Show, the podcast with a purpose for the people. I am your host, Christopher Keith. Thanks for joining us. And obviously, we are brought to you by Queso What, which is celebrating their 1 year queso anniversary this weekend. So, on tomorrow, well, actually, when you get this, it's going to be today, going to be the 28th of January. They are doing a pop up from 12 to 5, and you can even order your quesos, okay? So you go to www.quesowhat, QUESOWHAAT.com to place your order, or you can text your order to 314-341-7734. Again, that's 314-341-7734 to get your quesos, okay? As a matter of fact, the first, fifth, and 10th pre-order will be free. You'll get a queso free, one queso free with the first, fifth, and 10th pre-order that comes in. Okay. So take advantage of that. They're doing great things over there. It's great food. I wish I was there to have some. If you're in the St. Louis area, check them out today. Okay. Okay. So what? Again, celebrating the 1 year anniversary. Congratulations, Shantae and the crew. All right. So anyway, this is a very special for real though show. It's very personal, and this is dedicated to my children. Um, Most of the time, you know, people they well, I know for me anyway. My as I grew up, I thought my parents were superheroes. I thought my mother and father knew everything in the world, and I didn't know that they were just people. I didn't really figure that out until I got grown myself. And so I wanted to share with my children, anybody else who can get something out of it, what my life was like. I've always kept it real with my kids, from the time they were little, age appropriate, of course, but I've always talked to them about things that uh, I felt was important, never really held back from them, when it comes to talking about life and stuff like that, life situations, heartbreaks, whatever. I've always tried to keep it real with them. I never wanted them to not be equipped. Okay. And so with that being said, again, I didn't know, I found out that my parents were human, much later in life. Okay. And I don't want that to be the epithet for me and my kids. Now all my children are adults now, but I still think that most adults don't really break it down to their kids. They may tell them some stories about, excuse me, how it was when they were little or some things that they did, but they don't really know them. So I think that my kids know me to a degree, but they don't really know me. They don't know like how I became who I am. The good, the bad, the ugly, the admirable, the not so admirable, the mistakes, the flaws, and everything like that. So I am doing this for them because I want them to know who their father really is. The things that I've always thought, things that I've experienced that we may have never talked about. Some of them we may have talked about. Most of it though we haven't, because I didn't think that I didn't see the value until a series of events that happened. I didn't see the value of my kids just really knowing my childhood, which I kind of pushed to the side, for a lot of various reasons. So, that's the purpose. That's the purpose. So, my children, as I talk to you guys, you know who your father is. So you can know part of yourselves that you may not even realize is there. I have a lot of ways. I got some ways from my father and I got some ways from my mother. And some of them from my father I recognize, but some of them from my mother we'll talk about. And we haven't lived together since I was 14 years old. We'll talk about it, and I've never seen her do it. I'll do it. I've never seen her say certain things. I find myself saying those things, and I never heard her say it until we talk about it. Uh, so that's part of that, and also so you guys can have an understanding and therefore power over what may similarly ail us both, right? Or relate to how my behaviors may have affected you. Everybody's got a before and after, and I'll explain that. And lastly, the purpose of this is just so you guys can be empowered to just living your best life. And hope, that you'll raise your children with the same knowledge of who you are, and not just who you are, but then who I am, and how it related, how it passed down, because some things pass down. And I know that a lot of us, we tend to live life, uh, just kind of in our own cycles and repeat, rinse, repeat what we see other people do and what we see in our own families, you know. But I want you guys to be, fully aware, better than. I don't know a whole hell of a lot about my family beyond, my parents, uh, beyond some, extended relatives. I don't really know much about, beyond my grandmother's and stuff like that. If I went 2, 3 generations back, I couldn't do it. Uh, I couldn't do it because I don't have that knowledge. So I subsequently don't have the knowledge of who they were, how they got to be where they were, and that sort of thing. I only know little stories here and there. And again, I'm not about a lot of people. So, all right. So, welcome to that. Let's do it. So, how did I get this idea? So, I got this idea from a couple of books, actually. The first book, well, the first book was a Will Smith book. I know everybody may, or some people may catch an attitude about Will Smith and his slap and whatnot. That was definitely the lowest point of his career. However, I tell you what, his book is excellent. There are some really, really excellent lessons in his book that I thoroughly, thoroughly enjoy. I mean, I almost didn't want it to end because it's that good. And I also started Viola Davis's book. And one of the things she talked about in it was, she said her and Will were filming Suicide Squad. And he pulled her to the side once and asked her, he was like, "Hey, Viola, who are you?" And she said, "What do you mean who I am? I'm Viola Davis." And he says, "No, no, no. I mean, who are you?" And she still didn't understand. So he explained it further. He said, "I'll always be the guy whose girlfriend broke up with him when he was 15. So I had to trip off that because I did remember that story. Will was getting ready to try to do his rap thing. He was really into it. And he had a girlfriend that he was very, very close to. And he envisioned that they would get married and, be together forever. And he wanted to be just like his dad. So his dad was provider and this, that, and the other, took care of his family. He wanted to do the same thing. And, but the trajectory of his life and how he looked at a lot of things changed from that devastating moment. So at that time, when he told her that story, Viola began to rehash her own history of growing up, and I believe it's Central Falls, Rhode Island, where they were extremely poor, like poor, like poor, uh, where she ran home every day, was getting called ugly, black, and this and the other, and kids just chased her all the time, chased her home and whatnot. And she had a really hard time with the poverty and with being chased home, beaten up and stuff. So she said, "I'll always be the girl who ran home every day, in the 5th grade." And so that made me think about something in my own life, because if you would have asked me, years ago, like where the trajectory of my life changed, I would have said that it was when I was living with my father between 81 and 85. And that was when I left South Bend, Indiana, and I was living with my dad, and we were just kind of all over the place. We'd be okay, and then we'd be homeless, then we'd be okay, then we'd be homeless. And, we didn't have a lot of money at all. His and I relationship wasn't that great. And, I was kind of living like a vagabond. You know what I mean? I was like a gypsy. And so I thought that all of my decisions and stuff stem from that time between 81 and 85 when I had, when I left the house and all that. But what I learned, and actually I just learned this a few months ago, was that no, my life really changed when I was in South Bend. Uh, because my stepfather was a hot mess. He was very verbally abusive. He was not supportive. Uh, from the time I got there, and I'll get into that story. So, really, really, what happened is that my experience with my stepfather, thus having to leave my mother, is what changed me. It's really what changed the whole trajectory of my life. So, if I were to put it in a paragraph, and I wrote this down, I would say, "Who am I? Who am I? I, Christopher, am the kid who moved to South Bend, Indiana in 1975 with my mother's husband, along with my big sister. And after 6 years of oppressive verbal abuse, uh, put downs and intimidations by said husband, I secretly left for summer vacation in 1981, knowing that I was not coming back to South Bend. But it wasn't just leaving South Bend. I left my mother, I left my community, I left my sister, I left my dreams for what I thought my adult life would be. I thought I was just leaving him, but I actually left a whole life. I left a whole life at the age of 14. And so I had to reflect. I had to reflect and face that kid. I had to face that kid because number one, I kind of just pushed him aside, right? And sometimes you think of a little kid and you think he ain't really got nothing to say. He's just a little kid. He's just navigating his way. But that little kid, man, was a real survivor. You know what I'm saying? That little kid was a son of a gun because he survived all of that shit. And even though he went through a hell of a lot, he still survived. And I, like Viola, I had to learn to embrace that kid. I had to learn to love that kid that was hurt, that was battered, that was bruised, that was put down, that was called names from his, supposedly protector. You know what I'm saying? Uh, so I had to learn how to live with that dude, and nurture that dude. You know what I'm saying? I just couldn't put him to the side. I had been doing that all these years. I never took stock of him, but that cat was a real survivor, a real survivor. And we'll get into that. Oh, all right. So, let's see how I started. So I'll just start, I had the regular childhood, grew up in East St. Louis, was living on Gady Avenue. My parents split up like around 74, I imagine. So I was about 6 or 7 years old. And I remember living over my grandmother's house. Uh, and then we were staying in East St. Louis in these projects called The Hole. And the reason it was called The Hole, it's not really, there wasn't the official name, but if you're from East St. Louis, The Hole is these projects where they just sat literally in a hole. Like, so it was kind of underground, like if the street was up here, the hole was down there, and that's where we lived. And my mother met a guy, named Larry. And Larry was, dating my mom and shit. I think he was like the first guy that I saw dating my mom other than my dad. Not that she didn't have dates or whatever, but that's just the first one she brought around. And after a while, he asked, I guess he asked her for her to move or to get married or whatever. And so, she came and asked me, what I thought about it. I remember this, and I was the kind of kid, man, that hey, if my mama liked it, I liked it. You know what I'm saying? If she didn't like it, I didn't like it. I'm a mama's boy, always have been a mama's boy, And so, we end up moving. We end up moving in 75. And I was in third grade. And so, he, like I said, he was acting all nice then. Uh, but, I soon found out that, he wasn't really a cool guy at all. Okay. So we'll get to that. So first of all, even when I moved with my grandmother, when I was a kid, before we moved to Indiana, like change was always something that I had a hard time grappling with. So anytime we moved to a new place, if I went to a new school, it would take me like a good quarter and a half of school to get acclimated, and feel comfortable, you know, with the classroom, with the new kids, with the teachers, and I always got really crappy grades. That first quarter, first semester, I always got crappy grades, and I used to get in trouble about it. I used to get a whoopings and stuff about my grades. My mama thought I was just screwing off, and I wasn't, man. It really wasn't that. It was just, when I think about it, I can think about it today that I had a hard time, and it's funny because my son Alex, he had a hard time when he was a kid. Anytime there was a change, it was tough for him, and he wouldn't get along with the kids. He wouldn't get along with the teacher. He stayed off to himself. And I remember when we was dealing with him on that. that I had a certain amount of compassion because I knew what it was. So the teacher, I remember one time, one teacher was like, she was like, hey, this, the kid was just worrying her to death. And it was so bad the way she was talking. I was like, why don't we just take him out of your class? And she was like, oh, no, 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 don't take him out, blah, blah, blah. And so, I was like, wow, okay. She really likes him. So I explained to her, I said, well, let me tell you, when I was a kid, I had a hard time with change. And Alex, I think, is the same way. So if you just stick with him, once he knows who you are and he trusts you, he'll be the best kid ever. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. So while in November, I'm getting ready to try to pull him out the class, by May or March, rather, he passing out papers. He's a teacher's favorite person. He does all the favors for it, looks out for it, and that's how he was. That's how he was through all of elementary school. And so, needless to say, change was tough for me. We went to South Bend. I think outside of East St. Louis and St. Louis, I had never really been out of town before. Maybe to Pennsylvania to see my grandparents, but so I'm in this whole new environment. It's the first time I ever had white teachers. First time I ever had white people at school. And it was kind of a conglomerate. So it was like white people, black, and a lot of Mexicans. Never met a Mexican before until I went to Indiana. And a lot of them came from Texas and Chicago. So, that was a change for me. It wasn't a bad change. Again, I was just kind of person that I was observing and absorbing, trying to absorb what was going on. And so the first thing that happened to me was kind of a culture shock, because to me, they talk funny and they telling me that I talk funny. So I remember I'm in third grade, man. And they're like, "Ooh, Chris, you talk country," and I'm like, "Shit, y'all talk country." You know what I'm saying? I'm like, for instance, they call a soda a pop. And when they would say pop, like it would take me the longest time to know what the hell they was talking about. And I remember even in third grade, this guy told a joke. Uh, we were like telling jokes in the class and stuff. And this one kid said, why why did the boy put ice under his father's bed? Why did the boy put ice under his father's bed? And the answer was because he wanted a cold pop. And I'm thinking, okay, ice, his dad is a pop. What is so funny about that? Neither did I. I did not know they was talking about a soda. so, so, so yeah, so that was a different thing. Again, the change of being a kid who's not from there. Nobody was really, everybody that was there when I, in third grade, they were all from there. The school was K-8, so it was pretty large, group of kids. It's also where I met my longest time friend, Rob Laskowski. So me and Rob was in Mr. Stymie's class. Mr. Stymie's was kind of like, if you, those in St. Louis, I don't remember this in South Bend, but those in St. Louis, if you remember a little kid show called Mr. Patches, maybe it was called Mr. Patches, I think, but that was the character. He was a clown. And, he used to have jokes. He used to say, hey, shake feet, and stuff like that. Well, Mrs. Stymie's kind of ran his class like Mr. Patches. And so he would give you stars and prizes if you did certain good things. He had prizes on the board, kind of stuck to this board. And if you win certain things, you get enough stars on your papers and stuff like that, you win a prize. So he kind of made learning fun. Uh, and so that's where me and Rob got connected. And me and Rob, so that was 1975. Me and Rob are still really good friends to this day. Uh, we still keep in touch. Rob's a Bears fan and a Michigan fan. And even when we were little kids, when I got walk in his room, he had like Bears, Chicago Bears sheets on his bed. And he had like University of Michigan stuff on his wall. He didn't like Notre Dame. I don't know how he didn't like Notre Dame living in South Bend, but that's neither here nor there. We both hate Notre Dame now, so it's all good. Uh, other thing that you guys don't know about your dad is I actually had a friend. I believe maybe it was maybe it was fourth or fifth grade. I had a friend. Speaking of Mexicans, it was a guy who lived down the street from me. His name was check this out. His name was Jose Cuevas. Oh, Cuevo, right? The same way you spelled the tequila. That was his name, Jose. Okay. And me and Jose hung out every day, all the time, like during the summer. I go outside, But yo, check it out. This crack star sell up. Jose did not speak English. Like Jose did not speak a lick of English. So, but we hung out every day. And I was the only person that talked in the relationship. You know, we be walking down, we go to the store, we walk to the park, we play on the swings or whatever, right? And I'd be the only one talking about like, hey, Jose, let's go to the park, you know, whatever. He'd shake his head, you know, but he never spoke, you know. And if he wanted me, he would whistle. He had a really loud whistle like Phil Jackson. He'd go, you know, I can't do it. But he would let's real loud and I turn around. That's Jose, you know, and then I go over there, walk to him, and we hung out all the time. Uh and so that was my first experience, you know, with like someone that was not black, you know, that was not white. That was my friend because me and Rob became friends right off the top. And so I used to go over Jose's house. I think only his uncle, he was living with his uncle. And he was like he was from Mexico and he showed me where he was. It wasn't far from Juarez. I think it was called Renaso or Rayo, Renaso, something like that. Anyway, he showed me on the map. If I looked it up now, I could find it. But I used to go over his house and eat dinner and stuff and eat lunch. He had a sister. I don't remember her name. It might have been Maria or something like that. But she was older than me, and she used to always wolf whistle at me. So every time I come over, she go, you know, and start laughing and giggling and stuff. And I was kind of intimidated, you know, because I'm a young cat, you know what I mean, like really young. And she was older. She probably was a teenager, and she didn't speak no English either, like none. But her uncle did. There might have been her father, but Jose's uncle did. They were extremely nice to me. And I'll never forget them for that. So they, you know, I just see them put tortillas on the stove, you know, like on a burner, on the gas burner. They get them, then flip them over and stuff like that. And you know, and then they'd get brown on one side, brown on the side, and they'd eat it, you know, put some rice and beans in it and stuff. It was the first time that I saw like what a whole piñata was. Like somebody had a birthday party and you know we were in the backyard and they did the blindfold, you know, trying to hit the thing. It was just really cool. It was a great cultural cultural experience. Uh, and so we hung out, man, for years until he moved to Texas. But we before he moved to Texas, uh, Jose actually did speak some English at one point. So this is what happened. So I'm sitting there, I'm looking for Jose. And at this time, I'm having a hard time finding this dude like day to day. You know what I'm saying? Like day to day, Jose is not to be found like he normally is. So like he must got some new set of friends or something. So I'm over. His uncle's like, you know, I think he's in the back, blah blah blah. Look for Manny, yada yada yada. You know, so I go to the back and look around, and you know, I'll find this garage, and I see these two cats is in the garage. So I look in there and I see Jose in there. So Jose is in there with this dude, and they smoking weed. So me, being the L7 square that I was, I'm like appalled. I'm like, you know what I mean? So I'm like, Jose, I can't believe it. I've been looking all over for you. Here you are smoking marijuana. I can't believe it. You ain't got nothing to say for yourself, you know. And he didn't say nothing. He just looked at me, you know. His eyes got big. And I said, fine, I'm leaving. So then his friend goes, hey man, he's gonna tell. And then Jose stops and goes, please, please. So he starts chasing me down. And I said, Jose, I said, man, go somewhere. I'm not gonna tell on you. I'm not a snitch, you know. And I wasn't gonna tell on him, you know. I was just like I couldn't believe it. Uh, I was shocked by a lot of stuff when I was growing up. My sister and mother, we were all on a conversation today on three-way, and we was talking about something. We were talking about when I was a kid, and my sister had a boyfriend, and so this was the first boyfriend she had moved into South Bend. His name was Gary Gray. He was a little short dude, looked like Foster Silvers with a big afro, like perfect afro. And so he came to the house and he was talking to my sister. Like he was outside the door. My sister was inside the door, the side door, because you know we weren't supposed to have no company. And I remember I was talking to him and stuff. He seemed like a nice guy and he took a little interest in me. So, you know, I'm all hyped and stuff, you know, I'm like, hey, Gary, I could do this, I could do that. And I was like, hey, I could make a boat out of a piece of paper. I could shape it into a boat. He was like, "Oh yeah, for real?" He's like, "Yeah, why don't you go show me?" So I went to my room and I made the paper out of the boat and stuff. I put it all together. And then I went to the door to show it to him. I was like, "Look, here it is." And they were sitting there kissing, like straight kissing, like all in each other kissing. And I started crying because I had never seen nobody kissing my sister. I'm like, what the hell? Right? I just started crying. I was like, oh. So yeah, I got over that. That was cool. But yo, yeah, yeah, that was just kind of kid. I was just kind of innocent, you know. Had another Mexican friend named Alfred Hernandez. So Alfred was younger than me, but he was really cool, really, really cool little dude. And I think he was like a grade or so below me, maybe 2 grades. I'm not sure. But anyway, Alfred had a sister named Letitia. And when we was in the 5th grade, we was in class together. And man, I had a crush on Letitia Hernandez. Boy, I thought she was the prettiest, most glamorous thing walking the face of the earth. And so Letitia was really quiet. She was really, really quiet. And I don't know how it got out that I liked Letitia, but it got out. And but I never stepped to it. You know what I'm saying? I was always too intimidated because she kind of had an intimidating look about her. She wasn't a real friendly person. She wasn't dismissive. She was just to herself, right? And so one time we was joking, and this kid named Robert Sanchez was in class, and he says, "Oh, don't say nothing to Letitia. That's McKaylee's lady." So everybody went, "Ooh." You know how it is in the 5th grade. Everybody's like, "Ooh." And so Letitia got totally embarrassed. She thought that I put it out that she was my girl, which was like totally ridiculous because I never would have said nothing like that. But I guess, I don't know, some kind of way, me looking at her standing in class, whatever, some kind of way they figured it out. And so they put me on blast. So she just would not say a damn thing to me, right? So one time, me and Alfred, we did sleepovers. One at his house one Friday, and then at my house the next Friday. So I went over there for Friday for spend the night at his house. And Letitia and Alfred, they had several brothers and sisters. It was a big family. And so I remember, we was playing and stuff, and we was pillow fighting. Like we did everything. Me, her, and Alfred. Like we was mostly playing the whole weekend, like just kicking it. And I remember saying to myself, I can't believe it. She's being nice to me. You know what I'm saying? I can't believe it. And we kicked it, had a great time. And then I saw her on Monday morning, and I kind of looked at her, and she gave me this look as if to say, look, that was the weekend. That was away from school. This is school. Don't do it. And so I caught the message. I was like, okay, it's not me, it's the location. You know what I'm saying? It's the location. But I used to call Letitia. I used to call her and be like, can I speak to Letitia? And then she had one brother named Hector. And they just call her Letsy. They go, Letsy, telephone. So she get on the phone. And this is the first thing she say. I say, hi, Letitia. She go, what do you want? Every time. And I'll be like, I ain't had no lines, I ain't had no game, nothing. You know what I'm saying? I'll be like, just called to see how you was doing. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I knew not to talk about the weather. That was about it. But I was like, just called to see how you was doing. So yeah, that was my Letitia Hernandez story. We never got together. I knew what the boundaries were, and it was all good. So sadly, I don't know where Letitia or Alfred is. I actually called Alfred maybe 15, 20 years ago. They gave me a number. Uh, I don't think he answers, like a roommate answered or something, but he never called me back. My friend Rob told me he's sort of a hippie now. He's kind of doped out doing this thing or whatever. So other than that, let me see. I had nemesis. I had nemesis at school. Steve Richmond and Percy Reed. So Steve Richmond and Percy Reed, and the funny thing about them, they are still best friends to this day. Uh, but they were my nemesis. They like always wanted to fight me. As a matter of fact, lots of guys wanted to fight me because I was the new guy. I was a little different. I didn't really fit in. So I had a lot of guys wanted to fight, and I hated to fight. I just did everything I could to avoid it. You know, and one time, excuse me, one time these guys was gonna jump me. So it was kind of like we were just sitting in the bathroom. We was in the bathroom. We was in maybe sixth grade. Excuse me. And I remember being in, how like in sixth grade, you all go to the bathroom together. I don't know how they do it now, but then, everybody went to the bathroom. It was very rarely could you get a pass to go to the bathroom. You all go at a certain time, you line up, blah, blah, blah. So I remember, standing there waiting to go pee or whatever, and everybody, take your turn in line. And this guy named Keenan Dopes walks up to me and he goes, "What you say about my mama?" Now, mind you, I ain't said nothing about his mom, right? He's just looking for an excuse to fight. And I was like, I ain't say nothing about your mom. And he goes, "We'll see after school. We'll see after school." So that was his like, he was like being old dog before old dog in the 70s. He's like, "What you say about my mama?" So it got all over the school. You know how they go. Chris and Keenan go fight. Chris and Keenan go fight. And then it was Dwayne Dotson. It was Brian Kirkendall. Then it was all these other dudes was going to jump in it. So at the end of school, we get outside. I'm trying to plot my way to get to the crib. I had to walk home, walk from school. I didn't catch the bus or nothing. And this guy steps in. This guy steps in and he says, "If y'all jump on him and fight him, you're going to have to fight me." Now, who was this cat? My hero, Mr. Ivell Jennings. Ivell Jennings. So Ivell was chocolate. He had a big, beautiful smile. He had a perfect afro. And he was mean as a rattlesnake. Well, okay, that was his persona. He was mean as a rattlesnake. Everybody was kind of scared of Ivell. I wasn't scared of Ivell. I just kind of avoided him. I didn't mess with him. But Ivell was like, "If y'all jump on him, y'all gonna have to fight me." So none of these cats wanted to fight him. So they left me alone. So me and Ivell became friends. And it was really cool. Like we really became close friends, from like the sixth grade through the eighth grade. We were extremely tight. And the funny thing is we were just total opposites, because Ivell was like likes to fight guy. I was don't like to fight guy. He wanted to wrestle all the time. He was strong as a bull. And then another side story that is my stepfather, he didn't like Ivell either because his last name was Jennings. And in South Bend at the time, we had one black club. It was called Kevin's, one black club. And Larry used to work security for them. And every other week he'd come in talking about these Jennings boys, how they'd be shooting up the club. So Ivell was the little brother of them Jennings boys. As a matter of fact, one of them, guy was name was Joseph Jennings. Joseph Jennings, who they call Cambui, he ended up being like a pimp. He was a drug dealer. Like I'm talking Rolls Royces and the whole nine. And I actually met him. I met him through Ivell. He had this really nice red pickup truck with like in the back, it didn't have like two wheels in the back. It had like the double wheel in the back, decked out stereo, candy apple red. It was beautiful. I still remember. But so me and Ivell, like I said, we hung thick and thick as thieves, And all his brothers was like he had a brother named I Keith. He had a sister named Eileen. So they all was eyes in his immediate family. And so Larry didn't like me hanging with Ivell, but Ivell wasn't really like he wasn't really trouble like that. I mean, it sounded like he is. Like I'm gonna tell you some stories about Ivell. It sounded like he was really trouble, but it really wasn't. Like, but we had like this moral sense about us. Like, so even though we were opposites, like Ivell had a moral sense to his shit, right? So that was one time when this kid named Patrick, white boy named Patrick, he was kind of hippie stoner guy, and he was selling weed in school. So he got caught selling weed. So Ivell is fighting this dude, Patrick, in the hallway next to the principal's office for selling weed. Like he's fighting the dude next to the principal's office and laughing about it. So he like hitting him and stuff, hitting him, and he's laughing. He's like, "Sell some more weed. Sell some more weed in this school." You know what I'm saying? So it's like he had like this moral thing about him. He didn't just want to fight you for the hell of it. it was like he had to have a reason, so he just thought this dude selling dope in our school, so he was gonna fight him, and he did. He beat him up. How this dude was suspended for life, I don't know. But anyway, so then it was this time I was gonna get in a fight with Brian Kirkendall. It was just a solo fight. And I don't know what we got into it about, some stupid. It was about a bazillion Kirkendalls in South Bend. It still is. And, he wanted to fight. So he messed around and got put in detention. And so I'm like, okay, cool. He got to stay 15 minutes after school in detention. That's when I'm going to make my way back to the crib. But Ivell wasn't having it. So Ivell was like, hey, man, no, man, Chris, you're going to fight his ass. Chris, you're going to kick his ass. So I'm standing outside the front because Ivell won't let me go. I'm not bullshit. Ivell would not let me go. So I'm sitting there waiting. He like, no, we're gonna settle this once and for all. Once and for all. So Brian comes out, and Brian is like Brian, he was like the quintessential light-skinned 70s heartthrob, you know what I mean? So it was like light-skinned niggas was in, you know what I mean? And he was at the top of the list. He had like one girl on each side of him and everything, like straight up. So he come outside and he look at me and he like, yeah, you gonna kick my ass now? You gonna kick my ass now? And he kept pushing me. He kept pushing me. Kept pushing me. I wouldn't hit him back. Kept pushing me. And Ivell was like, kick his ass, Chris. Kick his ass. Kept pushing me. So then he finally pushed me up against the dumpster. So the dumpster was like right outside where the cafeteria is. So I had all that milk and stuff on it, that sour milk. And I remember it was on my jacket. Like it was a lot of snow outside on my jacket, my coat. And I got so mad, man, I just started swinging on him. And I remember calling him Bucky Tooth Beaver. That's what I call him. A Bucky Tooth Beaver. And I'm swinging on him. Bam! Hit him in the eye. Hits the ground. And he like, oh, I'm really finna kick your ass. Nah, he got up and he was like, wait a minute, my eye. So then his eye started swelling up, like really bad. Scared the bejesus out of me. Because I'm thinking I really done messed his eye up. So then the patrol boys come, right? Oh, do we still have patrol boys? I don't know. But they like the kid that's on your age level, but he got a little badge and help get the kids across the street. And he's supposed to be in charge. So patrol boys come over, and these girls come and they say, Chris beat him up. He didn't even do nothing to him. Like that. So then the patrol boys finna get me, and then all of Brian's boys was finna get me because they was finna jump in at the same time. And then Ivell, my hero, my savior, you know what this dude said? Chris! I said, huh? He said, run! So I made a beeline. I made a beeline down Ford Avenue. And I'm kicking it. And I ran, it was probably like 6 or 7 blocks to get to the crib. And I probably ran like all of them in record time, right? So the next day I get to school. Got to go to the principal's office because they reported us. And Brian and I decided that what we would tell the school in order to squash this was that the fight was a tie. We would tell the school the fight was a tie so he could save face. But then, it was cool after that. Nobody ever messed with me again. Nobody ever messed with me again. Yeah, so that was that thing. And so me and Ivell, man, we was like the quintessential, adolescents, right? Again, we used to kick it all the time. He didn't play no sports. I was really into baseball. So he didn't hang out with me on that. But we did a lot of stuff, riding our bikes together, all kind of far places. We used to ride a bike to the mall, which was like really far. At least it seemed really far then. It seemed like it took forever to get there. And it was like, I know I ain't got no damn business riding all the way out here, on some bikes, but we did. And, we used to talk about girls all the time. And I remember, we first heard about tongue kissing and stuff. And he was like, man, I ain't never want to tongue kiss no girl. That's nasty. I didn't have no feelings about it one way or the other, but I was just like listening to him say it was nasty. That was in the 6th grade. By the time we got to the 8th grade, he was like, man, I was kissing her, man. I tongue all in her mouth, man. I was great. So that was the cool thing, man. So he used to say he used to say that we was gonna drive trucks together. He said, man, we're gonna start our own trucking business and we're gonna travel the country. And hey, it wasn't really my thing because I said I'm gonna be a professional baseball player, right? But again, I wasn't gonna, I wasn't gonna hate on a dream or nothing. You know what I mean? So I would just let him say that, yeah. But I'll be thinking to myself, you drive the trucks, brother, but I'm gonna be, you know, I'm gonna be all over the country playing Major League Baseball for some National League team, the National League, man. Uh, unfortunately, fortunately, when I moved back to East St. Louis, uh, well, I'll get to that in a second. So again, go back to my nemesis, Percy and Steve. So they used to want to fight me all the time. Uh, and I stood up for myself in my way. I wasn't trying to fight and stuff, but you know, I remember one time we was in gym and we had this really, really crazy gym teacher named Mr. Beisel. Mr. Beisel was kind of sadistic because what he used to do is make us play dodgeball, right? But he would change it to his modified version of dodgeball called kill. And that's when all the boys had to take their shirts off, right? And instead of just running, like you run to the middle of the court to grab a ball, but then you can just, instead of being behind the line, and trying to hit the person with the ball, you could chase them anywhere. And you just keep hitting them hit the ball until they quit, right? So I mean, we fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth graders running around, where I mean, just savagely tearing each other to pieces with these volleyballs. I mean, people catch red marks all over their chest, some on their face, because these dudes were like really get into it. I would never play kill. I played dodgeball. I ain't played no kill. There was times when I was playing basketball, and I'd be playing basketball with like this dude Derek Triplett. We playing 1-on-1 and stuff. And Percy would come take the ball. Neither Percy nor Steve, neither one of them was athletes. They was like Stone and Robert on Cooley High. That's really who them niggas was. They were Stone and Robert on Cooley High. Uh, and so he would take the ball. So then I chase Percy down, get the ball back from him, and then he walk up to me, "Hey man, why you take my ball?" And he just swing on me. So he swing on me, I swing back. We hitting each other, they break it up. And then, they be like, okay, y'all two sit over there on the bench. You can't play no more. Sit on the bench in the bleachers. So we sit on the bleachers, and then Percy walk out because we again. He was like, "Hey man, why you hit me?" And he swung on me. Now you think by now I would have got the message to swing on this fool first, but I didn't. I didn't. Because I'm over here like because you hit me, yo. So we going back at it, swinging again. Uh, so it was nothing too much other than that, man. I didn't let him get to me that bad. Uh, so the other thing, man, was speaking of baseball. I was really really good at baseball. As a matter of fact, again, our school was K-8. Our baseball team was seventh and eighth graders. I actually made the team as a fourth grader. As a fourth grader, they used to call me Little Man because I was that big as a kid. I was like really small, really tiny. I remember I used to wear a 10 slim for a very long time. But I made the squad. It was a big, big passion of mine. Uh, and I thought I was going to play. For real, for real. I was always, except for the fourth grade year, I was always by far the best player on my team, and I had some pretty good teammates. Um, but anyway, the sad thing about Ivell, I'll get to that right now, is when I was in 10th grade, when I moved back to Lincoln, I got a phone call from Rob. And he called me. He found me at school. I don't know how Rob thought to call me at school, but he found school. And he called me, and he called me to the principal's office. And I answered the phone, and he's like, "Yeah, man, Rob, Ivell was in an accident." I'm like, "What kind of accident?" He's like, "He was shot." I'm like, "He was shot." And he was like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "Well, is he okay?" And he said, "No." I'm like, "He died?" He said, "Yeah." I'm like, "What happened?" Well, he didn't know what happened, but all he knew was that he was with Percy Reed. And So me and Percy, we actually made contact on Facebook maybe about 7, 8 years ago. And we was talking, hey man, how you doing? Blah, blah, blah. Percy stayed in trouble. So Percy was the kind of cat when we was in fifth grade, he had a lot of brothers too. And all his brothers was thugs, right? And we were in fifth grade, and I remember he had a blue jean jacket. On the back of it, he had printed in letters, that steam printed letters. They had Gangster Reed on it. Ganster Reed, Reed. And like, when the teacher used to ask you what you want to be for when you grow up, Percy said straight up, I want to be a gangster. Like real smooth, real laid back, like wasn't fronting, sticking his chest out. It was just in him. You know what I'm saying? It was in him. He said he wanted to be a gangster. And I remember shortly after I left, he got into a fight and somebody stabbed one of his eyes out. And so, unfortunately, uh, you know, Ivell was hanging with Percy. And I mean, we used to couldn't stand Percy because them cats was trouble. Like, get as much as Ivell was likes to fight guy, he was never the kind of guy that just wanted to fight for no damn reason. You know what I'm saying? There had to be a reason behind it. But he was he was uh he was hanging with Percy, like they was kicking it. And I have to admit that I felt some type of way. I felt kind of guilty because I felt like if I hadn't moved, then Ivell would have been hanging with me. Like I felt like that I was the most decent cat that he knew. Because again, all his brothers was gangsters. All of his relatives, his uncles, they was all into the crime life. And I felt like Ivell having that potential being likes to fight guy, that him and Percy probably got cool and they saw some shit they can get into. Well, anyway, Percy, we was communicating back and forth. He told me that him and Steve were still best friends. They still talked every day, although Steve lives in Virginia. Percy still lives in South Bend. And Percy apparently had taken all his, dope money and uh, he started, making little businesses out of it. So I think he was trying to kind of live on the straight. He was doing his little biz. He had a refrigeration business, had a little rap label and shit like that. But he promised me that he would tell me about what happened with Ivell, but he never did. Whenever it came time to do it, he never did. And I respected it. Uh, I explained to him that that was just my boy. I love that dude. And, uh, I just thought it might bring some closure. But anyway, all right. So that was pretty much my South Bend experience. I had some great teachers. I remember Miss Powers, who turned to Miss Horvath, because she got married to the sixth grade teacher, Mr. Horvath. He was sixth grade science teacher, and I just teased him all the time because they had lunch every day, and I just say, y'all gonna get married one day," and they did. And then Mr. Horvath ended up being my baseball coach. Um, so I remember everybody that was good to me, and I remember everybody that wasn't. So so how did I end up leaving? Well, uh, again, all those years that I was in South Bend, like I said, my stepfather was just really, really shitty towards me. From he had a lot of daughters, never had a son, and so he's just trying to make me something I wasn't. Like he would buy everything was just over the top macho with him. You know what I'm saying? So he buy me a punching bag, and he hit the bag, blah blah blah, and then we would go shooting. Larry was type, he was a cop, and he used to make his own hollow point bullets and shit at the table. So I knew that they were illegal, but he would make them and put them in his service revolver and shit like that. He had a bazillion guns all around the house. Uh, and then, he would take me to the range shooting. Well, he just never made it fun. You know what I'm saying? It never was fun. It was always, we're going to sit here till you hit that target. Everything was, like I can't swim to this day, cannot swim to this day. And one of the reasons why I was so afraid of the water is because we went over one of his buddies' house, Mr. Rosenbaum. It's funny how, like, I couldn't tell you where I refed last Tuesday, but I can remember all these names and stuff. Mr. Rosenbaum was this rich Jewish guy that was really good friends with Larry, older guy, and he had a really nice house and he had a pool in the back. And so we over there on one Sunday afternoon, me, my sister, mom, Larry, and maybe a few other people. And they're like, hey, Chris can't swim, blah, blah. So this dude picks me up and throws me in the fucking water. Like he throws me in the deep end of the pool. Oh, you'll be all right, huh? And I'm in there gulping and and he had to jump in and pull me out, and I had been like that just kind of screwed my whole world up for thinking about swimming. Uh, he was just that dude, man. He was just a horrible dude. He just never had nothing nice to say. And still I wanted to please him. I remember one time he came to a baseball game, one time. And, he pulled up in his little police car and stuff. And I had gotten a base hit already. And then I was playing second base. And while he was there, somebody tried to steal a base. I caught the ball from the catcher, tagged the dude out. And again, I was still like the smallest guy on the field, although I was the coldest guy on the field. So, he was like, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Coach told me you hit the hell out the ball, and he saw me do that tag out. And I thought he was going to be proud of something, you know what I mean? But, he really wasn't, because I wasn't his kind of guy. I wasn't super rough around the edges and shit like that. But, there wasn't just about me, though, because, again, with my sister, he tried to, he had a friend named James, who was also a cop. And he also, like, he took my sister over James's house and they were showing her porno films, so, and she was just a teenager, you know what I mean? So obviously inappropriate, you know, he even spanked my sister while she was naked. I mean, so, he was a super bad, just horrible ass dude. And so one time I was cutting the grass and we had a really beat up lawnmower, but we had a really beautiful, well manicured lawn, front and back. And he took a lot of pride in it. So I'm cutting the grass in the back and the lawnmower stopped. So I'm checking it, check the gas, blah, blah, blah. It's gas in it, but it wouldn't start up, steady pulling, So I had to stop. So when he came home, I was like, I had to call him daddy, which I hated because I rather had the choice to call him daddy or not, but he made me call him daddy. So I was like, daddy, the lawnmower broke, what's you do to it? Didn't do nothing. I was just cutting the grass. So he went outside to look at it. He couldn't start his damn self, right? So even though he couldn't start his damn self, and he checking the oil, the plug, everything else, he can't start it. So he like, yeah, fucked up the lawnmower. That's what you always do. Fuck shit up. And I just remember thinking like, I can't win with this dude. You know what I'm saying? I can't do it. So then I called my mom at work. And I was like, Mama, Daddy just cussing me out about the lawnmower, you know. And so she listened to me about it, and she rarely got in between it, you know what I'm saying, between us. Maybe she did in private, I'm sure, but she didn't do it in front of me. So obviously she said something to him about it. So he came back and he was like, yeah, I heard you told your mama about the lawnmower, me cussing you out about the lawnmower. And I didn't say nothing to him, I never talked back to him because I was scared of it. And he goes, that's what's wrong with you. So you're a little pussy. And man, when he said that to me, I guess I was 14 then. I said to myself, that's enough. So, every year I would go to Pennsylvania, New Kensington, Pennsylvania, 18 miles south out of Pittsburgh, and I would go see my grandparents. And this time, though, I said, when I go to Pennsylvania this year, I'm not coming back. I'm not coming back. And I didn't tell anybody. Uh, and so basically, when I did that, I ended up going. Ended up going for the summer, like I always did. And when it came time for August, I didn't say nothing to nobody until August when it was like almost time to go back to school. And it was time to go back. And I told my grandma, I was like, yo, I don't want to go back. I don't like him. He don't like me, and I don't want to go back. And I asked her if I could stay with her. And I was sure, I was like 100% sure she was gonna say yeah. Because this is my grandmother on my dad's side, Georgia Moore, rest in peace. She was just so good to me. She was so good to me and my sister growing up. Whenever, I went there for the summer, You know, man, she cooked every day. She cooked every day except Friday. You know, Friday we ate something out. And then Sunday she cooked a big meal. You know, we eat that leftovers for a few days, and we say, "Hey, Grandma, what's for eat? What we eating for dinner?" And she would say, "Must go." I'm like, "What's must go?" And she said, "What didn't go yesterday must go today." You know, so and you know, she used to buy school clothes. Whenever I came, like I didn't sleep in pajamas in South Bend. I had like a, you know, drawers and a t-shirt or something, you know, undershirt. And you know, but she didn't get down like that. So, you know, she would buy me pajamas. Like, and I especially like when I was a kid, I really loved the pajamas with the footies in them. You know what I'm saying? The little padded footies in them. So you have to wear those socks. But she just took great care of me and Darcel. Uh, so I just knew she was gonna let me stay there, but she didn't. She was like, she didn't want to raise no more kids. So, you know, I got it, you know, so she's like, you can ask your father, you know. So my father, you know, was living in East St. Louis at the time. And uh I don't think he was there. He wasn't there. He visited some summers, but he wasn't there. Um he came, well, no, he wasn't there, but he said I could live with him. So I ended up going there. And I told my mom, you know, I'm like, hey, I want to go back. You know, I'm not coming back because I can't deal with, you know, daddy, you know, which I had to call him daddy. And, you know, she was shocked, but, you know, she was respectful, you know, of it. You know, she didn't say nothing to me about it. And I think the important thing to remember before I get into what happened after I moved is is you got to understand what I left, you know, because I left everything. You know, I had albums, I had a stereo. And, you know, you guys know if you watch my show, you know how much I love music. I had a lot of model cars. You know, I used to make model cars all the time. When it wasn't baseball season or if it was cold winters and stuff like that, it wasn't a lot to do in South Bend, you know, and I didn't have a lot of friends. So I would like drive my bike to Kmart and I would buy these model cars. It was like $5.99. And or you know, someone was $2.99, someone was $5.99. That was like the most. And I had so many model cars that I would like mix and match the engines and the motors and stuff like that. I had like the Trans Am with the Firebird on it and everything like that. And on my stereo, man, I used to go into my own world. I had this big imagination. And I remember at night, I used to play my albums. Like I remember I was playing you know, the album Fight the Power by the Isley Brothers. And I played B-side that had For the Love of You, Sensuality, and Make Me Say It Again, Girl. And I would play that album, you know, and I would see the little needle, you know, just it would be so smooth, just like that, right? And then I would imagine myself in one of my cars driving, like I was listening to the stereo in my car, and I would imagine myself driving like off into the sunset, like in Arizona or something, because it would be mountains on the side. That's like was my imagination. And so I used to just play like I was cooling, you know, riding, you know, driving my cars while listening to the Isley Brothers or, you know, whatever else, you know, music I had. Not to mention, man, we didn't have any black radio stations in South India. We had like a public radio station that would play like, you know, black stuff from like 6 p.m. to 11 p.m. on Saturdays only. Okay. And so that's where they would play the Bar-Kays and Parliament Funkadelic, the Dazz Band, you know, you name it. But also when cable first came out, we used to take the cable off the cable box because it was just called HBO. Then you had an HBO box and it had the little two things that go into the back, that screw into the back. We should take them mugs off, hook them up to the stereo, and like if we was cleaning up and stuff and was listening to like WBMX in Chicago, so we listened to Black Station. Other than that, man, it was all pop and country, you know, and that's kind of how I got hip to pop and country music. Was listening to that stuff. Devo pop music, Neil Sedaka, uh, you know, all them cats back then, the Eagles, Foreigner, Boston, you know, all them cats I got hip to. The Bee Gees, you know, that was all in South Bend. So anyway, like I was saying, man, I left all that stuff uh, to start all over, you know, and you know, so again, I'm living with my dad, uh, I remember Larry called my school. He actually found the school that I was at because obviously shit had hit the fan when I left. And so he calls me. I'm in the ninth grade, and he's like, "Yeah, I want you to come back home. You know, I'm sorry for everything that happened. Blah blah blah. You know, things gonna be different. This that and the other." And I remember saying no. You know, it wasn't easy to say no either, but I said no. And the reason I said no was for two reasons. Number one, because I felt like it would be a betrayal to my natural father who I was living with at the time. And the second reason was because I didn't want to go back and be in a situation where he felt like he couldn't tell me nothing because I knew that I was still a kid. Like, you know, I'm 14. I never was the kind of cat that just thought I was grown. You know what I'm saying? It really wasn't my bag. You know, I wasn't really a rebellious kid. You know what I mean? I kind of did some things on my own and I stretched some limits and stuff, but my nature wasn't to be, you know, just a badass kid. You know, so I knew I needed guidance. But I didn't want to put him in a position where he couldn't guide me. And you know, and the other thing was, hell, it could have just been a trick. You know what I mean? Just to get my black ass back out there. You know, so I didn't do it. Um, but like I said, you know, so then, you know, so then I'm living in East St. Louis, went to Hughes Quinn, and I went to Lincoln, and we didn't have an address in East St. Louis. We never did. We never really had an address. Again, I think by the time when I left, when I graduated, we was living out in O'Fallon, Illinois. But before that, we was always just mostly, man, easy. We was the homeless or we was staying over somebody's house. I mean, that's just basically what it was. And I remember when I remember, shoot, hold on, let me catch my train of thought. Yeah, I remember I used to just go to my cousin's house every day. So shout out to Eleanor Big Jesse Fields, lived on 2020 Trinley Avenue, East St. Louis. And I used to go over there every day, you know. So he would drop me off at school, give me some lunch money or something. And then I would get out of school, go over their house and stay over there, you know, and hang with my cousins, you know, hang with Juan. Uh, and we'd be playing out at Dunbar High School. I mean, Dunbar Elementary, be playing basketball or whatever. And I would just hang out over there every day, you know, until he picked me up. It could be 6, it could be 7, it could be 9, it could be 10, you know, at night. This was every day during the school year. And even sometimes during the summertime, that's where I'd be. As a matter of fact, I was over my auntie house so much that I remember Big Jesse, who was just the greatest of guys. He's OG uncle, rest in peace, Big J. I remember him telling me, you know, when I was a teenager, you know, he was like, yeah, you know, you need to, you know, I have to talk to your daddy, you know, because, you know, you're wearing your welcome out. You don't want to wear your welcome out. And I remember feeling bad, you know, like, damn, you know, I'm wearing my welcome out. You know what I'm saying? Um, and so, you know, so me and my dad, man, we didn't, like I said, man, really, I think that he took me on because he felt like he had to. Now, mind you, when I was in Indiana, he wrote me one time, he sent me $5 in that letter, wrote me one letter, sent me $5. Hardly ever talked to him. And even when I was little, when they broke up, you know, there were times when I would just be sitting outside. Me and Darcel would be sitting outside on the front porch waiting on him to come pick us up, and he wouldn't show up, you know. And I was the kind of kid, you know, I was defending my daddy. You know what I'm saying? I was like, something must be wrong with him. You know what I'm saying? He coming, you know. And Darcel would be pissed, you know what I mean? Like, I ain't gotta go over there. Get him, you know. And I would be defending him, you know, because that was my cat, you know what I'm saying? When I was little, that was my dude. And so yeah, I think even then, you know, when I was a teenager, you know, he was struggling, you know, and you know, he was like a lifelong salesman. He was a great dude to get along with and talk to. He had a lot of friends, uh, you know, that loved him. His name was Otis. And but you know, he made some enemies too because he was always really shitty with money. He'd be borrowing money from people, he owed money to people. And so I remember when I wanted to work at McDonald's downtown East St. Louis. And at that time, the owner was a guy named Dwight Flowers. We used to call him Mr. Flowers. And Mr. Flowers used to sit up in McDonald's and hold court, you know. Great dude to talk to, had a suit on every day, three-piece suit on every day, light-skinned brother with the wavy hair, you know, and he kind of used to talk like this, he used to string his words out, like, but he was really a dirty businessman. So like if you was just kicking it with Mr. Flowers, coolest mofo in the world, right? Because I got my love for newspapers from my dad. So uh we used to go do newspapers and stuff. And hold on one second. Give me 1 second. I'll be right. All right, I'm back with you. Thank you for that quick moment. I had to answer a quick call. So anyway, Miss Flowers would string his words out and he'd be like, la, la, And so, like I said, we would go and read newspapers and stuff, and my dad would be talking to Mr. Flowers, and other people would be talking to Mr. Flowers. Like at McDonald's, it'd be a bunch of old men that would always come there every single day. Sit there and hold court. I thought he was the nicest dude in the world. And so when I became of age, I'm like 16 years old, went to a job and stuff. And I'm like, Mr. Flowers, can I work for you? Can I get a job? They're like, yeah, Chris, we'll see, man. We'll see. And he would just always put me off. So I ended up getting a job. I ended up getting a job at the McDonald's on West Florissant in St. Louis County, which meant I had to catch the Alta-Sida bus to the West Florissant River Roads bus, which was like an hour and a half to get to work because he would not hire me. So finally, I was like, Mr. Flowers, come on, man. You were promised to hire me, blah, 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 blah. What's going on? She was like, well, Chris, you got to talk to your father, man. He owed me some money. That's what it is. All right. I said, I tell you what, Mr. Flowers, whatever he owe you, if you hire me, you can just take it out my check, my first check. Oh, okay. Okay. So Cat hired me. I'm working on the grill and stuff. And I'll be damned if when I got that first check, now mind you, minimum wage is what I was making, $3.35 an hour. When I got my first check, Mr. Flowers walked up to me, showed it to me. It might have been $130 or some shit, 140. Had me sign it. He took it across the street to the bank, got what he needed, and gave me the rest in cash. Mr. Flowers was hardcore. You know what I'm saying? And and it was funny because like if somebody, I remember this dude dropped some burgers on the floor, like fresh meat burgers on the floor. This probably be like, no, that's okay. Pick them up, put them on the grill, And one time, Mr. Flowers was like, he came through the drive-through, and we had this dude named Wilkie Rice, who I went to high school with. He was in the drive-through, and Miss Flowers tried to play him close. He was like, Wilkie, it's me. Hook me up. Hook me up. Like he didn't know that Wilkie knew it was him. You know what I'm saying? So he was like, well, you got to order something, man. What you going to order? He was like, yeah, give me a cheeseburger. I'll pay for that. So Miss Flowers pulled up to the window. Wilkie got the biggest freaking McDonald's bag we had, stuck one cheeseburger in it, and put it out. It was like, that'll be 85 cents. And then he had the bag. Miss Flowers was like, give me that bag. He was like, and he gave him the bag, and it was one cheeseburger in it. Mr. Flawless thought he was slick. But anyway, he was that dude, man. He was that hardcore. Was not a great guy to work for at all, unless you was cute, a female, and working the register. You know what I'm saying? Then he was nice to you. That was that cat. But anyway, so yeah, so that time with my dad, like I said, man, we just clashed a lot, And I remember one time, I used to walk streets of East St. Louis all the time, all the time. Like it was no thing, and it wasn't unsafe either. Like I had a big boom box, and I remember, playing my rock music or whatever. Like we listened to a lot of rock. We listened to a lot of Billy Squier, Journey, uh, Meatloaf, all them cats. Sammy Hagar, Billy Squier, all them dudes. And, I used to have this big boom box. I used to walk all over the city with it. And one time I came home, it was kind of late. My daddy stuck paper in a lock, so I couldn't get in. This was one of the two places that was ours while I was there. Was this little apartment building on I think 33rd and State Street. And I stuck the key in there and I couldn't get in. Well, I knew he was mad at me, and I knew he just wanted to knock on the door so he can give me shit. So I called my sister, who was living on 85th and State. And I was like, yo, Darcel, daddy locked me out the house. So she called me a cab. Cab picked me up, took me over there. She told my daddy off. You can't be locking the boy out the house. He's just a teenager, you know. Uh, so anyway, and I remember, so when it came time to graduate, he was like, you got to go to college or you got to get out of here. You got to go to school or you got to get out of here. Now, the funny thing about going to school is I couldn't go. I mean, I could have went to school maybe, but nobody ever talked to me about it. Like nobody ever talked to me about college. Not in high school, not my father, not my mother, who by then was living in California. Uh, Nobody ever talked to me about college. So it was never a thought to me to even go. Like, in essence, they may sound stupid now, but nobody ever talked to me. So at school, if you was smart, like the counselors would talk to the people who was like really smart, like the gifted people. Like if you was really sharp and smart, they talked to you about college. Because I remember people going to the counselor's office to do that stuff. And I was like, I just didn't think I qualified. I didn't think I was smart enough or whatever, you know. So, I didn't go. I ended up going to the service. Um, but I remember even like, like I said, man, we lived a pretty raggedy life. Then I remember asking my dad for a class ring. Like, I wanted a class ring so bad. And I picked one out. It was probably like $190 or something like that. So it wasn't the most expensive ring, but it wasn't the cheapest either. And I'm showing it to him, Daddy, would you give me this class ring? And so he told me he would get it for me. And then he told me he sent the money in and everything, but he never did because I never got the ring. Uh, he never took me driving lessons, nothing like that. I think I was just a thorn in his side, you know. Uh, so, like I said, man, so to that degree, I was just sort of a vagabond, just like I said, a gypsy, I was just to and fro. I was raising myself, um, just doing the best I can with what I knew, you know. And like I said, if you'd have asked me, so I'm gonna fast forward now, kids, to 2009 when my latest or last attempt, when I was going for my last attempt at suicide. And I remember after that, going to therapy. And I remember telling Miss Francis my story. Okay, so first I went to group therapy, and after I left the hospital, and then I went to individual therapy to where I could pick my own therapist out. And I found a lady who was a Christian lady. And I told this story before on one of the podcasts, but I'll tell it again in case you guys don't remember. But I remember she was like a therapist. So she taught therapy. She taught other therapists. And we were talking about just my path, everything that happened between 18 and where I was then, I guess in my 40s then, whatever 2009 was, however old I was then. So actually, it was 2010 then because I went to the hospital Christmas Eve, 2009. So by the time I got to Miss Francis, it was 2010. And I remember we were talking, because she went by your income. That was a great thing. So we were talking, and I remember when she said to me, because I was telling her about my childhood too, and leaving Indiana. And I remember her asking me, did you ever get angry with your mother? And I was like, angry with my mom for what? She was like, for not standing up for you when you was in Indiana. I was like, no. And she said, well, why not? I said, because she just did. I know my mom was doing the best she could. Like I had actually asked my mom years before. We were sitting down in the Applebee's in St. Louis. She was visiting. And it was a few years before, 2010. And I remember asking the question. I was like, Mom, why you didn't do nothing, when he was doing all that stuff to me? And she admitted to me and said, hey, Chris, I just didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to do. And, that was the first time that I knew that my mom wasn't a superhero. And upon learning that, it just humanized her for me. And I wasn't mad at her at all. I understood her. I said I understood that she was in a tough position. She didn't know what to do. And so Miss Francis kind of left it at that, and we just went on. And, she taught me a lot of great things about myself, how to love myself, blah, 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 blah. So now, again, I'm fast forwarding, guys, because you know a lot about what happened, after that. A lot of what you see today is what happened after that. But I started having this conversation with my sister, who is a therapist, as you guys know. For the rest of the audience, if you don't know, my sister's a therapist. She's actually the first person. I don't know that my dad finished college. I don't know that whether he did or not. My mom went to Notre Dame, but she did not finish. She took some classes. So my sister's like the first one to finish college. And one of the reasons she did it is because she wanted to set an example for the rest of the kids, my kids and hers, just to break that generational thing. And which I really appreciate and admire her for that. Well, anyway, so me and Darcel was having this conversation about our mother and about me. And, and she asked me, have you ever been upset at our mother? And I'm like, no. And I said, I gave her my reasons again, and we were just talking about how we dealt with South Bend. My sister was outward. She was outward. Like, in other words, she rebelled. She ran away from home all the time. She had boyfriends, the creepiest of the creepiest guys, really bad taste in men at the time, who were abusive. Like one guy busted her eye open, at the house in the basement. I remember this. Larry and mom was in St. Louis, and he was over to the house, and I thought she was laughing. I thought she was laughing. And when I went downstairs to see what was so funny, she was crying, and her eye was busted open. And she was washing the water. She was washing her eye out in the sink. And I remember then so this guy that hit her named Vincent Waller, I still remember his name too. He got scared. He was holding her face and stuff, and he got scared and left. Well, it was a good thing that he left because remember I told you we had a bunch of guns in the house? Well, I wanted to shoot that dude, because again, my sister's eye, I could see meat, you know what I'm saying? And she was crying, and let me tell you, it's a blessing because obviously that would have changed my life too, because I don't know how they'd have treated a black kid like that in South Bend, shooting another dude and murdering him, but that was my mindset. But he left. Um, but anyway, so Darcel was real outward with her. You know what I mean? Like I said, she rebelled. Like Darcel, like we be on punishment, right? And one of the punishment, like you can't get on the phone. Like she tell me I can't go outside because this will mean something to me. I can talk on the phone, but I can't go outside. But Darcel, you can't talk on the phone because she's a teenage girl. She talk on the phone. Darcel be straight cold in the basement. We had a finished basement. Cold in the basement talking on the phone. Mama upstairs in the bedroom. You know what I'm saying? Like straight up. That's how she was. And one time she even gave me the phone. She was like, hey, Chris, get on the phone, say it's you. Say it's you. And I couldn't lie to my mom. I was like, hello? My mom was like, Chris, ma'am. She was like, come upstairs. So I came up. She was like, sit you on the phone? I'm like, no, I rarely dime my sister out, for real. I rarely dime my sister out. She got away with a whole lot of stuff when I was a kid. A lot of stuff that I just never told. That was the one thing I told because I knew I was busted, right? I just was a terrible liar, so I couldn't pull it off. But anyway, so me and Darcel were talking about our different reactions to South Bend. And she was like, well, I guess you did better because you didn't go off the hinges like I did. You wasn't this rebellious, you know, kid that I was. And I was like, I don't know, Darcel, because you were outward with yours. Mine was inward. So I kept everything inside. Everything inside. And it just piled up. So, again, if we ain't had no place to stay, oh well, you know what I mean? Like it didn't bother me. Like if I came home and the lights was out, I'd be looking forward to watching TV or something like that. If I come home, lights was out, lights was out. It's just out. So maybe I put on my radio if it had batteries. You know what I'm saying? Like it never bothered me. I just on to the next thing, on to the next thing, on to the next thing. But what that ended up leading to was a whole lot of depression, a whole lot of not feeling safe, no matter where I was, not feeling safe. So after we talked about that, again, she was like, she asked me the question, do you ever blame my mom? And I was like, no. And I told her why. And she said, well, Christopher, you could take our mother off the hook, but you got to put her on first. And I was like, what do you mean by that? So, she explained it to me. And, I wrote a little paragraph that I'll share with you because, it kind of surmises what happened with me. Okay. And how I dealt with it with my mom. So I'm going to show you a video. And this video is from a show called This Is Us. And one of the characters, and the black character's name is Randall. And Randall is a lot like me, or I'm a lot like the character Randall. Not in a whole bunch of ways, but in some ways, And some of the ways that he's kind of corny, some of the ways that he's very thoughtful. He's kind of a square, but not really. Like he's kind of a square to cool people, right? But really cool people get him and who he is and why he's the way he is. And they appreciate him for that, right? And one thing about it, when you're a kid, if you're like me as a kid, you're not very much appreciated. You know what I'm saying? Because again, I wasn't popular, I wasn't a nerd. I was like in social purgatory. So that wasn't really a place to be. If you was a nerd, you knew your place. You stay over here with the nerds, ain't nobody gonna bother you. If you was cool, you hang with the cool crowd. If you was in between, man, it's like, it's like, I don't know, like the Bible, you need a hot nor cold. I spit you out my mouth. So I guess I was more so attracted to bullies and stuff like that. And so was Randall in a way, but he was a smart kid and I'm a smart kid, So I'm gonna share this video with you because this is him in therapy. And in therapy, he starts to understand a lot of things about his mom. So before I share this, I want to share this, as you can see on the screen here, because of copyright laws. I want to give this disclaimer for YouTube and whatnot. But this is a warning. The FBI, it calls for fair use and is allowed for purposes of criticism, news reporting, teaching, and parody, which doesn't infringe under the Copyright Act under 17 USC 107. So I'm showing this because again, I ain't trying to throw no shade on This Is Us or take their material, what have you. But I wanted to share it with you because it's so pertinent to how I have felt and how I stood up for my mother and how me thinking that everything that I was going through was having to do everything else except my mother. When in actuality, every damn near every issue that I've had to work through in my life, real talk, has had to do with the relationship and the actions between myself and my mother. So with that disclaimer, I'll share this video.
Okay.
What?
Which is not making the sound right.
Nothing. I said okay.
No, you don't
Hold
think
on.
it's the
Hold on. I
same,
got it.
right?
I have to do this
But you
microphone.
don't think it's
Give
the
me a second,
same because
folks.
I
Let's
knew.
start this over. I'm going to go back and let's do it again. This should work. Sorry about that. I don't have a producer. I'm the producer. Here you go.
Okay.
What?
Nothing. I said okay.
No, you don't think it's the same, right? But you don't think it's the same because I knew my dad my whole life and I knew William for less than a year, so the bond was different. Obviously, it was easier for me to make peace with his death.
Is that what you think?
I think I lost two fathers. And I think if I had it my way, obviously I wouldn't have lost either one of them. So to answer your first question, yes, I'm fully aware that I'm just a cute little pawn on the universe's big giant chessboard. I don't need an exercise from some overpriced therapist in cheap shoes to prove it to me. That was uncalled for. Sorry.
Oh, please. I live for this stuff. It's interesting, Randall, how you see this entirely as an exercise about losing your father. Your fathers, plural fathers.
I don't follow.
Actually, this whole exercise began because of a disagreement that you had with your brother over your mother's care. If you think about it, your life has really been defined by your mother's, hasn't it? The mother you lost at birth, who is barely a footnote in your story, and the mother who lied to you for 36 years.
All right, look. William told me everything he knew about my birth mother. It was a romance that was sweet for a time, but it was short-lived and drug-addled. I'll never know much about her. I'd accepted that long ago. As for my mother, Rebecca, yeah, she lied to me. But I forgave her for that. We've moved on. I've accepted that too.
Have you?
Absolutely. It's behind us.
It's curious, though, that in both your scenarios of how your life would have played out if your father had lived, the first thing that happens after you save him, the first thing is your mother tells the truth about William. Why do you think you're here in my office right now?
I know, because everybody who comes to therapy has these deep-seated mommy issues, right?
I didn't say therapy, I said my office. My office. Do you know how many black men who can choose whatever therapist they want choose me? It's a very low number.
You were highly recommended.
Your mother and I are the same gender. We're the same race. I'm probably around the same age she was when your father died. Another therapist, a good one, not an overpriced hack like me, might say you're looking for someone like your mother to help you process her. What she's done. Her illness. I'm not a neurologist, Randall, and I don't know your mother's condition. But I'm pretty sure you don't have all the time in the world to heal from the wounds that you have from her.
So what are you saying? What is the exact advice that you're giving me?
I'm a therapist. I don't give advice. I offer observations and I pose questions. Observation. Even in the worst version of your life, you still protect your mother. You still redeem her in the end. Question. Have you ever really confronted your mother about what she did to you? About what she kept from you?
All right. So we're back. A second to get out of this. All right. So we're back. Yeah, so give you a little backdrop on that. Randall is on the show. He's adopted, and his mom kept his birth father away from him, blah, blah, blah. And so, he had a lot of issues and stuff dealing with her and dealing with that. And so here are the similarities. Like, I was the same way, always redeem my mother no matter what. And the truth of the matter is ever since I left Indiana, this is the reality, guys. Ever since I left Indiana, I had never felt safe. That's all my adult life, okay? Since I was 14. Guys, I never felt safe or covered in any given situation. I felt lonely, isolated, unwanted, disconnected from my safe space. Because remember, I said I left everything. I left my artwork, my albums. I left my whole life. I left my baseball career. and I didn't blame my mother because I thought she was happy with him. Okay. And as I got older, I understood she had difficulties, and I made room for understanding for her, that she didn't know what to do, during my crisis with her husband. I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that my mother would not do anything to hurt me. This I know for sure. And that I know then too. Still, the results of her actions or inactions was what led me to be filled with insecurities, instabilities, deep depression, feelings of being unwanted, unworthy, because I was not chosen. My mother did not choose me, nor did she fight for me at that critical time. She said she respected my decision, but she didn't fight for me. My wanting to make my mother happy was me making an adult decision on behalf of her that I should not have to make. I laid myself on the altar and made myself her sacrificial lamb. I was 14 years old and was not mature enough, wise enough, nor was I at the age of consent to make such a life-altering decision on my own. I was not qualified or mature enough to make that decision, and live with the consequences. And the way the consequences played out in my life was that I never, like I said, I never truly felt at home. I never truly felt safe. No matter what situation I was in, I always felt like, the shoe was going to drop, the floor was going to move beneath me. There would always be something else, you know, uh, and that was the backdrop of my life. Okay. So all the times, you know, uh, Sherelle, Christian, Alex, when you guys were, you know, little and I was with your mom, it was the same thing. I never felt safe. I never felt like I just, and even with Miss Francis, me going to Miss Francis was just like Randall. So Randall's mom on Randall's mother on This Is Us was a white woman. She was his adoptive mother, but she was the only mother he knew. Okay. And so he went to this other white woman, like she said. And when I had to think about it, I had to trip off of it because when I went to Miss Francis, she was the same thing. She was a black woman. She was older. And every time I even thought about going to therapy, I always wanted an older black woman. And I had never, ever made this connection before. Never made that connection that I was trying to find. I was really trying to find where my mom fit into this. And I know that Miss Francis, like, she was the adult figure that I looked at, to try to help me navigate, to understand life. And it was like I wanted her approval. I wanted her, to help me make sense of life. And so the way I went through, life, in my 20s, 30s, 40s, whatever, it was to try to be, I tried to just compensate. You know, I had a sense of what I didn't have, so I wanted to give what I didn't have. You know what I'm saying? Uh, I never felt like I was truly loved for me. I never felt like that I was okay, that I was acceptable. And what I tried to do was compensate. I tried to be compensate by being useful, by, doing good deeds, earning my keep, being a good guy. And some things are natural. I'm a giver, I'm kind, I'm compassionate, I'm smart, thoughtful, considerate. Those are things that are natural to me. I was created that way. I connect with people, you know. But on the flip side, though, I always felt like if I drop the ball, if I disappoint, if I hurt someone, if I come up short, then my value to others would become null. You know what I mean? Like they wouldn't need me anymore because you're not of use. So I always felt like if I'm not of use, then I'm not going to be wanted anymore. I'm not going to be accepted. Um, it was just always the shoes, it was ready to drop. You know what I'm saying? And I always kind of, when I was waiting on that shoe to drop, I always felt like, okay, sometimes I was just trying to get away before it dropped. I try to beat it before it beat me. A lot of times I just want to disappear, get small, be unseen and unheard. you know, and I would, like I said, I'd make the inevitable exit before I was asked to. I remember when I was a kid, when I was in Indiana, I remember I used to hide in the closet. You know, I forgot to mention that, but I used to hide in the closet and just sit there. And you know, people, my sister, mom would be like, "Hey, where Chris at?" They'd be like, "Chris, Chris," and I wouldn't answer nobody. Blah blah blah. And then they come in there my room, and I'd be sitting in the closet. You know, I never knew why. You know, but you know, the bottom line is, you know, at that critical time, you know, nobody fought for me. You know, and I felt like if I didn't have nothing to give, nothing to offer, no smiles, no jokes, no uplifting the spirits, no impressive observations, you know, to, you know, cheer people up, make them laugh and stuff like that, that I wasn't, you know, I wasn't worthy and I wasn't going to get love, respect, you know. And you know, and so you know, and so to that man, I just had a lot of shame. You know, every time I came up short. I remember one time I was off into the streets doing my thing, and I remember me and my boy Blue was having this conversation, and I apologized to him, you know, because I had just kind of disappeared from everybody. You know, I wouldn't call my mother, my sister, nobody. You know, I just kind of broke myself off from everybody. And we was having this conversation, and I was like, yeah, Blue, I apologize, man, you know, for my behavior and my actions, and you know, my performance as a friend, man. You know, I really came up short. You know, and he forgave me. You know, and he said it's cool. And I remember I hit him again and told him again. He was like, "Well, see, you already, you know, you good, man." I said, "No, man, I really need to tell you, you know, blah blah." Blah. And so one of the things he had said though, he was like, "Yeah, you know, I understood, man. I was just gonna let you do your thing because you know, if you came to me, we was gonna have to have a man talk, you know." And the man talk is nothing more than, you know, just accountability. Your friends, your closest friends holding you accountable. And I said to myself then, yeah, you know, you're right. I didn't want the man talk. But you know what it really was? I wasn't afraid of the man talk. I was afraid that he wouldn't love me the same. I was afraid that based on what I did, the way I was acting in the streets, that he didn't have no respect for me, so he wouldn't love me no more as a friend, you know, as a brother. That's what it really was. I was ashamed. And I felt like less than somebody he would want to be friends with. That's what it really was. But it took me a long time, you know, to figure that out. You know, and the funny thing is like, you know, Blue's the kind of cat, you know, if you know him, you know, he got a lot of swag, you know, he's kind of a cool dude by nature, you know. And one of the times we was talking and I asked him about that, and he's like, yo, man, I got that from my daddy. You know, my daddy just instilled a lot of confidence in me when I was growing up, you know, and it just made me think like, damn, we was living in two different worlds. You know what I'm saying? Like we was literally living in two different worlds because his daddy was pumping him up his whole life. And, you know, my daddy wasn't, you know, my mama wasn't, you know. And so I'm trying to fight for my place in life. I'm trying to fight for my identity as a man. What is it to be a man? You know, and I used to want an older man, you know, to, you know, scoop me up, slap me upside the head a few times. Let me show you how to be a man, you know, like not in the way Larry did, but in a way that was, you know, that showed loyalty, that, you know, that showed real love and authentic love, you know, because I was always kind of cat, man, if you love me, I go to the wall for you. You know, that's why, like, even when I played baseball, if a coach believed in me, you know, and cared about me, it wouldn't be nothing I wouldn't do. You know, as a matter of fact, you know, I mean, I'm blessed that I didn't get in the game because you know, I was prime meat for a gang. You know what I'm saying? Feeling lost, isolated, you know, from your family, this, that, and the other. You ain't really got no roots. You don't feel the roots, right? So I'd have been a prime candidate. I wasn't a violent dude, but I'm sure that if I felt that it was an older guy that put some love in me, I would have been a prime suspect to be a GD or a vice lord or something like that, because that's what was going down, you know, in East St. Louis. Uh, you know, and I remember going to church, you know, wanting OGs, you know, like I wanted the OGs to, you know, to be down with me, you know, to teach me stuff, you know, but it turned out none of them really did. You know, they was just always talking that smack, but they wasn't about it. You know what I mean? And I guess it was a reason why, because they really wasn't about it. So really, man, you know, I used to learn reading books, and I read a lot of autobiographies and stuff about people's lives. And, you know, I used to do stuff like play basketball. Like, believe it or not, kids, I used to play basketball Well, for one, because you couldn't get 18 guys to play baseball. Well, when I really started playing basketball seriously, when I was like 18 years old, uh, the reason why I played so hard was because I was competing for a spot of my own manhood, and I felt like if I could compete with these guys who love basketball, who pray to Michael Jordan every day, you know what I'm saying? Who, was them kind of guys. If I could play and compete against those guys and win and know that I did something in that game to win, then that means I could make it in life. That was those were my measuring sticks, because it wasn't about whether I won the game or lost the game per se. It was about, did I cheat myself? So as I'm reading these autobiographies and stuff, and I'm reading about people overcoming stuff, I'm like, okay, what can I overcome? And I would go to the gym, and it'd be these guys out here hooping, and I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna go out here. I got next. You know what I'm saying? And before I could shoot, I was the coldest nigga on D. I'm checking you on D. Oh, you ain't scoring on me. And if you do, you best believe you're going to earn it. You know what I'm saying? I ain't care if I fouled you or whatever, right? But my thing was, can I just take something in here and something in here to, even if I got the last bucket, or if I prevented my opponent, who was the best player on the team, from getting the last bucket and we won, then to me, that showed that I could be successful in life. Like, those were my little examples, right? And so obviously, you guys know I worked a lot of low paying jobs and stuff like that, and I went from fight the power guy to, meaning that, hey, I was always a loyal worker, good worker. But if you tried to front me, embarrass me, some racism, shit like that, I would go off. I'd be like, no, I'm not doing that, so, although I did stand up for myself some, that was in the marketplace. But when it came to close interpersonal relationships, I didn't trust them. I just didn't trust them, because in my heart, it was always based on performance, you know? So that was the bad, that was the bad part, but the good part is about what happened to me is, I do have a big heart. I got a lot of compassion for people. I didn't get destroyed. I didn't become cynical. I didn't become, mean to people or try to punish people. I was really total opposite, because I knew how it felt to be hurt. So I've always been a critical thinker, always been a friend to the friendless. I have a tremendous love for young people, because again, I knew what it felt like. I went to see my little cousin Anthony Lamont play sports all through, high school, through Little League and stuff like that. I seen them in Hoop It Up when they was grown, because I knew what it felt like not to have your mother or father see you play sports. I'm still that guy now. I got relatives that are younger than me. I got some here, in Columbus. I go see it. I make it a point to go see it, because it means something to me to support them. You know, uh, Now I'm both a mentor, and a mentee. I got OGs in my life, that I talk to from time to time, that I know I can check in with, and I got young cats that come to me, and I'm able to keep it 100% real with them, because I ain't got no false pretenses. I ain't got no false, super over the top masculinity and nothing like that. Hey, we could talk, we could chop it up, we could be honest, we could be real, and I've learned to accept and embrace unconditional love and acceptance. So what you see of your father now, it's just a culmination of all those things. I didn't mention everything. Obviously, it's already a long video, but I just wanted you guys to know, how I became who I am. And again, maybe you can identify some things with yourself. So finally, I will say to my children, thank you for listening to this. This has been months in the making. And there was a time when I would even talk about, if I just started talking about this subject, I would start crying, literally. I would start crying, when I think about what that man did to me. And, to a little kid, at the end of the day, man, I was a fucking little kid, man. And one thing my sister told me, she was like, Chris, whatever way you are, just remember, you did not get that way by yourself. And for her to tell me that, it just freed me up a lot, It freed me up a lot. And so, I'm a much better man now. I think those things, just like Will and Viola said, I'll always be that kid. I'll always be that kid that left South Bend and left my mother, and I'm still a mama's boy to this day. And similar to Randall, He never did say anything else to his mom. To his, he never said nothing to his birth mom. I mean, to his adoptive mom about her not telling him about William, who was his father, who she had known was living his whole entire life, because it wasn't necessary to litigate it. And so, even though I understand, and I've shaken out all this stuff about my mom, I'm not going to litigate it to her. Matter of fact, she may not even see this video. I probably won't even send it to her because I don't want her to feel bad. Like, there's no reason to. She's, 77 years old. Like, what good is that going to do? Is that going to do any good? And the fact of the matter is I'm okay now. I'm okay. I love her. She's awesome. And she'll always have my heart. So finally, I want to say to my children, Sherelle, Kalia, Christian, Alex, Gabrielle, I want to say I love you guys. I wanted you to know who I am. I hope it makes sense to you. I hope it's something you can learn from, and know beyond a shadow of a doubt that you guys are the greatest thing that ever happened to me. I love you with all of my heart. My legacy rests on your shoulders and on the shoulders of your children, who I'm very proud of. You guys are all stand-up people. You're great people. I can't say that I really had anything to do with it. I think we're just blessed. I think I'm just blessed. You guys are just really great people. Hardworking, family people, gray head on your shoulders. Sherelle, Kalia, your kids are awesome. I love them. You know that. I'm Paw Paw, always will be Paw Paw. And I just want to say how proud I am of you guys. And, don't let it stop here, man. Let your kids know how you are. What have I done, to change your life? What is your before and after? Who are you? Make sure you know who you are. And make sure your kids know who you are. Don't be afraid to share it. It can set them free. So with that, I want to say thank you for bearing with me. I know it's a long video, probably one of the longest. But I appreciate you. So, like and subscribe. For Real Though Show, podcast with a purpose for the people. You guys have a great weekend, great week, wherever you are. Make sure you check in with Queso What? And get you some of them good quesos. Love you, kids.